Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Development Committee, 22nd of March 2018. First of all, our usual announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit to the chamber? Our assembly point will be in the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please don't delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. And please don't return into the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded, and can I remind you to switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence. They've been received from Councillor Mrs Shaw, whose substitute isn't here at the moment, Councillor Milne, who's been substituted by Councillor Lucas Gill, and Councillor Steptoe, who's been substituted by Councillor Webb. Okay, thank you. Non-members attending, Councillor Mr Hoy. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of February 2018. Are you happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Right, there are none. Item 6 has been withdrawn from committee, deferred for further discussion between the officers and the applicant. There's nothing on the weekly list, item 8, so we just have the one item tonight, which is Fairways Garden Centre, Holmbridge Road, Rayleigh. Sorry?
Going on without a deputy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'll cope. So, Katie.
Thank you. Members, this site has a frontage onto Holbridge Road. The northern boundary runs alongside Montefiore Avenue, and there are a handful of residential properties close to the site. A couple fronting Goldsmith Drive, one onto Holbridge Road here, and another on the corner of Montefiore Avenue and Holbridge Road. The site is designated as Greenbelt, and this is an extract from the proposal's map. The application site is approximately where the light is there. So it's set within the wider area of Greenbelt between the residential settlements of Holbridge to the north and Rayleigh to the south. Whilst being in the Greenbelt, the site is considered to qualify as previously developed land, as there are a number of existing buildings which are not in agricultural use at the site. Policy DM10 of the Council's Development Management Plan allows for the redevelopment of previously developed land in the Greenbelt, subject to the consideration of certain criteria. I'm going to take you through the existing development at the site, and then we'll look at the proposals, and then we'll go through the key considerations of Policy DM10, which are key to the determination of this application.
Actually, can I just stop you for a moment there? Members, I should have just mentioned at the start, there has been an addendum to this. Can I just double check that everyone's aware of that? Because it might be relevant and mentioned during the presentation. Okay, thank you.
So, members, this is the existing site layout plan, and it's orientated with Holbridge Road to the bottom of the screen. You can see that there are a number of existing buildings shown white, the majority of which are towards the southern central area, with one of the more substantial buildings to the northern boundary. These other areas that indicated white, sort of ad hoc, sporadic developments are a number of containers, storage containers, and a number of caravans at the site are used residentially also. So this gives you a flavour of the existing buildings on the site. This building is here towards the southern boundary and is a dual pitched roof building, the external finish of which is a combination of glass and steel corrugated metal. Adjacent to this adjacent to this is a glass house, now also put to commercial use, and in the centre of the site there's a building which has a series of low pitched roofs with a canopy attached running almost the length of the building. Adjacent to this building is a single-storey building with pitched roof with a conservatory attached to one end. And then the final building on the site is located to the northern boundary and is a series of flat and pitched roofs, partly timber-clad. All the existing buildings on the site are single-storey. If I take you just through a few photographs of the existing site, you'll see here this is part of the existing vehicular access to the site, with Holbridge Road shown just in the picture there. These are a number of the existing storage containers, and you can just sort of make out the edges of some of the mobile home caravans that are used residentially. Again, this shows the extent of the hard surface at the site, and some of the metal palisade fencing and some of the parking areas. This is a view looking southwards, so Hullbridge Road is orientated here, and these are some of the single-storey buildings. That's the conservatory attached to one of them. This is another view of that building. There are a number of commercial uses at the site within those buildings, and then that's one of the kind of larger sort of single-storey but pitched roof buildings. The proposal is for 16 dwellings, which would be laid out in a circular pattern around a central amenity space. Vehicular access to the site would be off Hullbridge Road, using the existing access. Each dwelling would have a private garden to the rear and parking on plot. 5 different dwelling types are proposed, all of which are similar in form, featuring traditional pitched roofs and a variety of external facing materials. The proposal is a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed dwellings. Just to give you a flavour of them, this is property type A. This is a 4-bed dwelling, 1 bedroom at ground floor, 3 within the roof space. Features a gable projection to the front elevation. This is another, similar in design and form, also a 4-bed dwelling, also a 4-bed dwelling with 3 of those rooms in the roof space. And then this is the smaller dwelling type on the site, which is 2-bed, both of those bedrooms in the roof space. Quite modest in scale, the properties that are proposed. So back to the proposals map, and the site again is located about here. Policy DM10 is the key Greenbelt policy against which the proposal must be considered. This policy allows for residential development of previously developed land in the Greenbelt if it can be demonstrated that the proposed development would constitute sustainable development, subject to consideration of various factors. Firstly, Policy DM10 requires that the proposal is well related to a residential settlement, and the site is closer slightly towards the edge of Hullbridge, but also within proximity of Rayleigh to the south. And despite not being adjacent to built-up residential area, it is not considered to be isolated from nearby settlements. Proposals must also be well related to local services and facilities. The nearest of those to the site is a retail store in Hullbridge at the corner of Ferry Road and Lower Road, and then again there is a small local parade of shops just on the corner of Hambro Hill and Rorath Lane to the south, approximately 1,000 metres from the site. The site is considered to have good connections to the strategic road network with ready access to the A130 from Rorath Lane. And occupants of the site would be able to use bus stops and bus services that run along Hullbridge Road, and there's a cycle footway along Hullbridge Road that could provide access to local amenities. Whilst the site is not within the South Essex Coastal Towns landscape character area, it is considered that the redevelopment of the site would not be harmful to landscape character in this locality, given the existing built development at the site and the scale and the design of the development proposed. Policy DM10 also requires that redevelopment proposals of previously developed land would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt or on the purpose of including land within the Greenbelt than the existing development, which would be replaced. And the applicant has provided a comparison which on plan form shows the comparison of the kind of hard surfacing at the site. So this is existing, buildings are shown in orange, and grey is the other hard surface. The site's almost entirely hard surface. And then the proposal, obviously you'd have the individual buildings, but actually a large proportion of the site with the residential gardens and then the central amenity area would all be permeable, soft landscaped. Obviously this table is not visible, but the applicant has done a comparison of the overall volume of development proposed, and the proposal is a reduction by some 2,000 cubic metres of volume. Whilst the development would be higher than the existing buildings, the proposed dwellings are still limited to 1.5 storey and not excessive in ridge height. And given that the volume of built form would overall reduce, it is considered that the proposed development would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than existing. The proposal is therefore considered to be an appropriate form of development in this greenbelt location. Take you to the site plan. The density of development proposed is some 14 dwellings per hectare, which is low compared to the 30 dwellings per hectare that would usually be sought as a minimum to make sites to make best use on sites to make effective and efficient use of greenbelt land. However, in this case, the low density is accepted given the need to limit the scale of development proposed in light of the existing built form for the benefit of greenbelt openness and character. Whilst the proposal meets other policy considerations in respect of garden size and car parking, to name but a few, as detailed in the officer report, the proposal fails to comply with the Council's affordable housing policy. This is set out in Policy H4 of the core strategy and requires a minimum of 35% affordable housing to be provided. This would equate to 6 dwellings of the 16 proposed. This policy does, however, require consideration of viability. The applicant submitted a viability appraisal which concluded that it would not be viable to provide any affordable housing or contribution. The Council had the applicant's viability appraisal tested by an independent consultant who concluded that the development would provide, or could provide, a contribution of some £663,000. The applicant has, in the course of the application, now indicated that they would be willing to make this contribution. However, despite the Council's consultant indicating that, as the development is a high-value residential scheme and that affordable housing on site is not considered appropriate, officers consider that the applicant must demonstrate that affordable housing could not be provided on site before a financial contribution as a fallback were considered. Policy H4 is strongly worded in that it requires affordable housing on site unless constraints make on-site provision impossible. It goes on to state that only in rare cases, taking account of particular site characteristics, the affordable housing contribution may be provided by way of a commuted sum. No evidence of any discussions with affordable housing providers has been provided to support an argument that on-site provision would be impossible. Indeed, the very spacious plots proposed are only one possible proposal that could work at the site. Whilst officers are satisfied with the principle of the proposed development, the proposal would not comply with Policy H4 of the Council's core strategy. The recommendation is therefore one of refusal for the following reason, which is slightly amended from that published on the officer report. And I'll read that in full, if that's okay. Policy H4 of the Rochford District Council Local Development Framework core strategy requires at least 35% of dwellings on all developments of 15 or more units to be provided as affordable housing, subject to viability. Whilst the applicant has provided an affordable housing contribution towards off-site affordable housing, the applicant has not demonstrated that provision of affordable housing on-site would be impossible. The proposal would therefore fall contrary to Policy H4.
Thank you. Councillor Gooding, I'm afraid as you arrived after the presentation has started, you won't be in full command of the facts, so you won't be able to vote on this one, but you will be able to take part in the debate. We have a speaker on this one, Mr. Kelvin Hardingham. I'll just turn the microphone on, please. Up to 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you've got a minute to go.
I'll keep it as brief as I can. Good evening. As you've had explained, the development is bordered basically by 2 residential roads and the main Holbridge Road. The Goldsmith Road, which is the one this side, has 2 adjacent properties. There's 1 property on Holbridge Road and there's 9 properties down Montefiore Avenue. Myself, I live in Montefiore Avenue. And I've spoken to 8 of the 9 residents. There's only 9 residential properties down Montefiore Avenue. I've spoken to 8 of the 9 residents and they all support this application. The 9th I have not been able to have the opportunity to speak to as yet on this. And as far as I'm aware, there is nobody down Montefiore Avenue, I can't speak about Goldsmith, nobody down Montefiore Avenue who has any financial or any other interests other than purely their own personal aesthetics for this development. Nobody's involved in it at all. The current situation, basically the site, as you were shown visually there, doesn't totally portray I would class as a blot on the landscape, to be honest. It is not a well-managed site by any means. The advertising hoardings you saw as you came out of the road, the picture there of the advertising hoarding on one side. If you look at the other side, they're even worse the other side. These advertising hoardings do actually affect cars leaving Montefiore Avenue. You cannot see some of the whole Holbridge Road. And it's to date, fortunately, we haven't had an accident from that. We've approached the owners of the site, but they have not taken these hoardings down. There is, and also, I understand there's been a number of applications on this site for caravans. 3 times since the 1990s it's been refused, and then on 2014 it was approved for a caravan sales site. Well, I understand, and I read in the Echo this week as well, that there are actually up to about 13 or 15 residential caravans there now, unlicensed, and they're under an eviction notice for the 11th of April. The site is, and there are a number of other planning discrepancies on this site. I'm sure your planning department can advise you, but they are currently trying to deal with it. The builder's merchant's on site. The builder's merchant at the back of the site. He uses it as much for a rubble dump as a building merchant. And along Montefiore Avenue, we have a surface drainage ditch, which we as residents maintain. We get a JCB and we have to clear it all out. And most of the time, it's full of building rubbish and other rubbish and effluent coming off of this site. It really is a blot on the landscape. The whole place is poorly maintained. As regards traffic, there's quite a bit of traffic flow there during the day, and I would think that this development, it certainly wouldn't increase the traffic flow. If anything, it would quite likely decrease the traffic flow from the site. As regards Greenfield and Greenbelt, yes, it is in Greenbelt, but it's almost really, it's more like a brownfield within a Greenbelt site. You know, and I can't see that this development will be anything destructive, more destructive than what the current site is. If you refuse this application on purely social housing grounds, you know, that's your choice. It is an outline application. However, bearing in mind that there are a number of other very larger sites around where you've got 200, 300 and potentially a 500 housing development, which is all social housing.
A minute to go.
It seems to me that it would be slightly inappropriate, bear in mind that this site meets every other of your national and local requirements. It's just purely, it seems to be, social housing. Now, can I just, so I wouldn't be long, just in conclusion. So I notice on your agenda, it states, the council residents are the heart of everything we do. It states on your agenda, I'm sure it states on every agenda you have. Well, this development borders 2 roads with existing residential properties. There are not many residential properties anywhere near around just these. 9 properties in Montefiore Avenue, I say, 8 of which support this application. Bear in mind it is an outline application. The residents of Goldsmith Drive, I can't speak for, but I understand that they made a submission regarding the proximity of 2 of the units to their boundaries. I understand that's been addressed. So when you're making your decision, I'd like to consider the area residents with a view to which the residents are at the heart of the matter.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Just knock the microphone off, please. Councillor Hoy, would you like to have your say?
Yes, thank you. Although it doesn't come into the Holbridge ward, it does come out onto the road, which is in Holbridge ward. It's just a few comments in relation to the addendum and the comments, and some of the other points around affordable housing and a couple of questions. This is an outline application. It's an interesting one because it's outline, but the only reserved matter appears to be the landscaping. So in fact, although it says outline, it's essentially the same as a normal application apart from landscaping is reserved. So we should be looking at the design of this, which is not normally the case within an outline application. I think it might be the first I've come across like this. Again, this is, I think the Essex the Essex County Council Urban Design comments are quite interesting. They refer to a lack of a pathway or crossing. They're referring to the design. Although I hear what the residents said, just because it might be an eyesore now, it doesn't mean that what goes there shouldn't also be good, and we shouldn't just accept something because it might look a bit better than what's there at the moment. So I'm a little bit upset that the officers just ignore everything said by Essex County Council Urban Design and dismiss it, saying that they believe it's satisfactory. I think the committee should pay attention to the points raised by the Essex County Council Urban Design team and insist that the points are kept. If you don't do it now, and it comes back, we've lost, because this won't be on this. It would have been approved without the points which are on page 4 of the addendum. I have a question around the affordable housing and the contribution. We have a standard of 35%. I'm not aware that we've ever accepted, or not in the time I've been on the council, accepted a contribution. Can you confirm, are we able to accept a contribution in a practical sense? Are we in a position that we could use that to provide affordable housing for residents? I know there's certain schemes which might be going through, but I'd be interested in that. And if there is a time limit on any contribution given from that. The only other point I will raise at this point, well, I can raise, is about the Greenbelt issue. On page 7.1 of the main report, it refers to some reason why Greenbelt exists. This in itself, you may think, isn't going to be contrary to any of those, and I think the officers indicated that in the report. I would say this is the start. Although it looks like it's not very well developed between Rayleigh and Holbridge, there are a number of houses. There's 3 roads coming off the Holbridge Road which have properties down them. This will then be another big site of 16. It just seems to me that this is starting to draw the 2 towns or village of Holbridge and the town of Rayleigh together, and I think that's contrary to the point first. The second point: prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, and also I think to safeguard the countryside from encroachment. I know I might agree with the view that it's not a nice looking site, so I think that should be a reason for refusal as well. That's it. If I can have an answer around the affordable housing, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, members. I think I'll lead on this one today. We've got an application site here which has been described, and we've seen some examples, as not necessarily being the tidiest of sites and possibly having issues to do with the legality of some of the housing on there. But what it is now, and its use now, shouldn't affect our reasoning for what might go there instead. However, the principle of housing on that site is a very relevant point, because further up the road we have another former agricultural site which has now got a vast amount of different uses on it, and the precedent of this site may have an influence on that. Although that's not a definitive reason that we can use, it is something that we need to bear in mind. If we come to the principal reason for refusal about there not being any affordable housing, as Councillor Hoy has mentioned, there is an offer being made of around 600,000 towards that. At this moment in time, the council doesn't have a formal policy or strategy for accepting that money. It is not our policy to do that. It is our policy to develop affordable housing on a site unless there is an exceptional reason why it can't take place. So if we were to consider accepting that, we would be making up effectively rules and regulations on the hoof of what to do with that money over time scale, how it's applied, and I don't think that would be appropriate or a safe method to go forward. The officers, broadly speaking, are accepting the principle of development on that site, with an argument with regard to policy DM10. And if I can ask you to look at page 7.10, section 5.9. And there are 6 points there which relate to the interpretation of DM10. And I will go through them in turn. Is well related to a defined residential development. I don't think that is the case at the moment. In paragraph 511, the actual figures are there. It's approximately equidistant between Holmbridge and Hambro shops. That sort of distance toward a kilometre is not a short distance. It's not the sort of distance that you'll just pop up the road to get something. That's a get in the car job. And that's not the sort of thing that we want to be promoting. Second point, one related to local services and facilities. The same argument applies there. It's got good connections with the strategic road network. There's a road that goes straight past it. You can't argue with that. Would promote sustainable modes of transport. Well, there is a bus stop just a relatively few yards up the road from there. However, you cannot get to it, and no part of this this application involves the provision of a footpath to the bus on the side of the road that the development is in. You would physically have to cross that road, quite busy, it's 40 miles an hour there, and then cross back again. I don't believe on that point it is properly connected. I think the only use that is viable safely from that site will be the use of transport. I think the other 2 points, you can argue that it possibly is acceptable on those. But I certainly will be putting forward an additional reason for refusal, that the application is not compliant with DM10, our policy DM10. So, in summing up what I've said, I don't believe that the policy is complied with sufficiently here. I think there are some issues, particularly around highway safety and access to bus stop. I think in the background there is the precedent about the principle of what's happening here. Certainly I totally agree with the affordable housing. And coming back to what urban design have said, I think that the principle of a closed-in insular development on that road doesn't offer us good design. Once you get in there, maybe that's a different matter. But we're talking about the amenity for the whole district. And as you travel down that Holmbridge Road, if all you're going to see is a closed development with a long section of boarded boundary treatment, I don't think that is particularly good. So I'll now open it up further. I don't know whether anyone was happy to second me on non-compliance with DM10. Councillor Mountain.
Yeah, I'm happy to second you, but also I just wanted to ask in relation to what Councillor Hoy mentioned about the separate identities of Holmbridge and Rayleigh, and if this is an infringement, if that can be regarded as an infringement on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is also summed up possibly in the first point of DM10 related to defined residential developments. It's plonk in the middle. It's not related to either, starting on its own. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I take heed of what you said, and would like to also put in that it seems to be an ad hoc development, in as much as we'll as conditions we'll get round to this and we'll get round to that, and so on and so on. We don't seem to have all the information that we require, and I agree that we're not in the process of building homes for ourselves, that's the council, in process of building homes with the money that is put aside. So I would agree with you on a lot of those things. The other thing that really emerges from it is that we have now got 4 ponds on that site, which again is we seem to be getting more ponds than we do houses, if you see what I mean, in relation to it. And I just wonder why if we're going to have children on that site, which is probably what we will have, in the way of what preventative measures are being put in place of those.
Interesting. You say that one. The pond, I believe, is part of the SUDS management, which is something right up your particular street.
You're
but
dead right.
I don't want to open up that one. The landscaping is the one item that is reserved. So the actual treatment of that area in the centre with the pond, how it would be managed, how it would be made safe and so on, that is a reserved matter that doesn't formally form part of this application tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Yes, on the back of that, it does seem from the addendum that the SUDS scheme is not complete, or there doesn't seem to be a fully worked up system for surface water drainage on the site, and that was another matter that was brought up by Essex County Council. There's another item that was brought to my attention in reading the report, but I don't know if it's a breach of policy as to whether it be something that could be looked at as a matter for refusal. But it does state that under economic development says that a detrimental impact upon the community and the economic prosperity of Rayleigh in relation to a loss of potential commercial land available for development. And perhaps that's something that we might need to think about.
Do you want to just make that point?
I think, yeah, in relation to that point, it is noted in the report, but as the land isn't allocated as such for employment land, it does make it potentially a less strong argument policy approach. But it is something that could be put forward, but there isn't a policy saying that that land is protected for employment use. Qualify, sorry, I didn't have that on.
So in that regard, is it something that could be added, or is it not appropriate to be added as part of this part of a possible proposal for?
Yeah, it's having the policy hook for that reason for refusal, and although there are policy to maintain, so it would be possible, as it's not an allocated employment site, it does make that argument less strong, if you see what I mean, for that purpose, because it isn't designated or allocated for that purpose. But there are potential policy hooks that could look to, retain small, medium-sized businesses in such locations. So there is potential.
The officers can't give you a reason. You have to offer it. I'll come to Councillor Mrs. Hoy first.
Yeah, can I have the fact that it doesn't meet the Essex urban design because there's no path and there's no crossing in it, and I just wanted to point out that if you come out of that site and you go right, just up the road from there is an actual nursery. Like, when I say nursery, I mean like a school nursery and that, children. And shouldn't we be, because I mean at the moment, if these houses were to be granted, then basically you're asking them to try and cross on a 40-mile-an-hour limit road just to get to the nursery school sort of thing.
I take what you're saying.
Yeah, do you understand what I'm saying?
But as always, we do have to be guided to an extent by highways.
Can you
And,
put it-
and 4.8 on page 7.6 clearly says at the top, from a highway and transportation perspective, the impact of the proposal is acceptable to the highway authority subject to the following conditions. I think we're going a little bit further with particular reference to access to the bus stop. But I think as part of the debate that we're having here this evening, we've got concrete reasons that are absolutely defendable.
Yeah.
The officers are noting the nature of what's been said with particular reference to economic development, toward highway safety and the crossing of the road. And clearly, if this application comes back, it's not just going to drop on the doorstep one day. It's going to be part of a much fuller discussion with officers before it even gets to committee. And we would hope that any applicant is wise in listening to the officers, the nature of the discussion we're having here tonight, and ultimately any decision that we make.
Right, okay then.
Yeah. So, members, we have a slightly amended reason for refusal printed on 2.77. We have a reason for refusal also based on policy DM10 or the lack of compliance. We have a number of points around highway safety, around economic development, around precedent, about the appropriateness of the design in that location, which has been duly noted by the officers. So can I ask those members in favour of the refusal on those grounds to please indicate? Thank you. That item is refused, and for good behaviour you get to go home early. Thank you.